Welcome to the Creative Community Podcast, presented by Destination Arete. I'm David.
And I'm Mark. And as brothers, we grew up telling stories together for over 15 years. And as adults, we want to continue telling stories together, and we want to invite you into our Brothers Brain Trust.
We started this podcast to share the beginning of our story and the stories that impacted us along the way, and continue writing that story together.
We are building a community of people who work together to find creative solutions to tell inspirational stories.
And one of those people that we are bringing into our community today is photographer and art instructor Greg Hewitt. This is somebody Mark knows, and many of our listeners will probably know as well. So Greg shares with us why he has a street photography Instagram account and why he shares those photos online. Not when he started, but more specifically, why he started doing that. He does talk about when it started, but it was interesting that he took the question that we sent him and changed it. So I'm really excited for you to hear what he has to say. And he also talks about the meaning behind his unique, cool, and mysterious Instagram handle.
He also shares with us his thoughts behind his editing process for his photos and the most memorable interactions that he's had out while shooting. So without further ado, hold on to your hats. Here is our interview with street photographer Greg Hewitt.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm Greg Hewitt, and I go by Hardly Invincible on one Instagram account. And that's kind of posting just life as I see it, things that I encounter and enjoy in that realm. And then I also have this side account called This Hewitt Life, which is more personal, where I'm posting more of our family type stuff and just like those small moments with the kids and with my wife. And I am a art and design teacher and chairing the art department at Pensacola Christian College currently, and enjoying teaching and interacting and collaborating with artists and designers on a daily basis.
A lot of people, I don't know, a lot of people probably know this because most people listen to it, the pod are Pensacola people, but Mr. Hewitt is our chair, and I am currently a GA there. So he's like above me in the hierarchy. It's weird because the whole GA thing, he's like my boss, but I also have another boss. And then I think I have another boss. So everyone who has ever been a graduate assistant know what that's like. But yeah, so he's one of my bosses. But it's great to have you on the podcast. Your Hardly Invincible Instagram account is absolutely fantastic. You post a lot of, like you said, life as you see it, kind of street photography and things like that. And that's kind of what we wanted to have a conversation with you about. So we wanted to start off with the first question, which is just, what was the moment that you knew you wanted to share your street photography with others?
All right, so I've been thinking about this question, and if you'll allow me, I wanted to back up slightly. And before I get to when, I wanted to kind of talk about why, if that's okay. So yeah. Why am I sharing? It kind of gets wrapped up in the name, Hardly Invincible. And this is something that, oddly enough, like kind of was in my mind as a kid, not those words specifically, but I've been a melancholic my whole life pretty much, and just kind of like I enjoy moments and I enjoy life, but I also was keenly aware that things could change, but I never thought things would change. And so I just enjoyed God's blessing, great parents, great sisters, great family life, good church. And in all of that, I, of course, had a super attachment to Superman and was always wearing something with the shield on it, had the red cape, had to have the yellow S on the back, of course, from the Reeve era of Superman movies. And so I was always pretending to be Superman, hoping to watch Superman on TV and things like that. And I wanted to be invincible. Like I wanted to be Superman and not have any weakness in life and just be able to help people and enjoy life and be strong and not have those weaknesses. But I was keenly aware that I wasn't Superman. And so I knew I had things that I couldn't do as well as other kids, or I had weaknesses. And that has just come even more evident to me as I've gotten older. And so the why, so when I was starting up my Instagram account several years ago, that name just came back to me. It was something that I had used in college for a writing portfolio that I had put together. And so it's always kind of been there. And so when I started the Instagram account, I thought, man, that would be a great name to just continue to use in my life. And so, of course, I'm checking on Instagram to see if it's available. And it was. So I grabbed it. And so it's kind of the why is I just want to show that it's okay to have weaknesses. It's okay as created beings. We are, of course, not perfected yet. And so we are under the curse and we have sin and we have weakness. And I just wanted to have that shared experience with people. And honestly, when I started the account, I didn't even really know what types of photos I was going to be sharing. So I was just kind of sharing everyday life stuff, just things that kind of struck me as beautiful, things that made me think a little bit deeper. I remember some of those early posts. I was posting things from the Visual and Performing Arts building on campus, just things that caught my eye. And then slowly, as we started doing more stuff out and about, as I was taking photos of my loved ones and my family and people with me, I started kind of turning the camera outward more fully and just kind of taking pictures of the people around me. And that actually kind of, not to do another rabbit trail here, but that kind of taps into something that my family has done my whole life as well. And that's we've been people watchers. I don't know if you guys have lived that experience. My name, Greg, actually means watchful one. And so I feel like that was kind of God directing my parents in there. So I've always been a watcher. And now that watching just involves the camera, which sounds a little bit stalkerish and weird, I guess. But yeah, just watching people and just kind of seeing life happen, seeing how people interact with architecture, with signage, with lighting, with other people, seeing how people interact with events. And I think like if I could pull a theme out of the stuff I'm shooting, it's just kind of experiencing life and the shared reality of we are all humans in a physical world that God created, and we all have varying degrees of weakness, and that's okay. We'll be perfected later and we will be redeemed from this weakness. And so I think that's kind of the why. And then back to I guess the real question, you said when? When did I start? I think, I don't know if there's like a definitive point in time. There was just this slow progression of I'm taking pictures of what we're doing, and then an interesting character walks through the frame with a great hat or a great color scheme, or there's, just something really interesting happening with the light. And so I started just making note of those things, taking pictures of them, recording them. And as I started sharing those, this was back kind of like earlier in Instagram's development, where there was like more community. And so we had this shared, I just met some really great people that I'm friends with still today, that we are on a texting basis. We share stuff privately, photos together, real friendships where we've met up in towns nearby, people from New York City, from Canada, where we've connected through this platform. Anyway, that community was just really great. And it was a lot of encouragement, like, man, this is a great photo. I love what you're posting, and you're starting to meet people. And I think that's just the power of art, where I'm sharing something where my vision is just showing humanity, showing the shared experience. And then that shared experience transforms into a real shared experience where we're having friendships built and things like that. And so it was just kind of a slow progression. Just as that community started to build, friendships forged, different people leaving comments, and just making that connection and being able to comment back and enjoy their photography and be inspired by what the work they're making. And just, it was kind of just propelling me onward to want to share more, to share better work. And so there was like that definite, that art spirit kind of permeating those relationships. And so it was, I guess, a slow progression more than like a set point in time for me.
That is a really fascinating. I'm really curious to ask this. Is photography the area, because you're a very creative person. You're very excellent at a lot of different creative things. You can write, you can paint, you can take photos, you can design really well. You're good at a lot of different things. Is photography, do you feel like, is that the medium where you have found the most community?
That's a fair question. Like, I think that's a fair assessment. I would say when I was really into wanting to get into portraiture and fine art painting, this would have been like grad school era. And so that we were all young and hungry. And my classmates and I were kind of pursuing the same type of career
Mhm.
or hopeful career path. And I'd say that community was really, really strong. And we were in person. So that has a
Mm.
dynamic that, digitally I don't have as much. But as far as like the encouragement and the inspiration, absolutely, I would say it's probably at the top. Just being able to connect with people and comment and encourage and being able to propel onward and help grow
Mhm.
is definitely up there. And I think probably supersedes that experience just a little bit from the visual art side.
Okay, cool.
Being on a college campus, first of all, the architecture, there's so many different lines, and it's so, I don't know how to say it. It definitely is inspiring just simply to walk across campus because you encounter, because every building was built either at the same time or at a different time, but it was designed to look. But the second thing that's most important about a college campus is that every fall you have a brand new community of people. And that's what I noticed the most about your photography is it's not really the architecture, it's not really the objects, it's what are the people doing in relation to these objects. And I'm curious to know how many mental photographs you've taken while you're just on campus, or while you're teaching, or while you're headed from class to your office or something like that. Is that something that you consciously think of, like, oh, I wish I could capture that, or maybe that's something I could find when I'm out this weekend? Or is that just something you're like, wow, I've never considered that before. It's too meta.
No, absolutely. And it's funny, this morning I actually did take a photograph in the visual and performing arts building. I can drop it to you later, but um, I was alone and no students were up there yet. So I pulled out my phone and took that picture. But when I'm in the moment and there are people there, I absolutely am mentally kind of cropping and
Mm.
framing in my mind. Um, Especially when there's any kind of like gorgeous weather happening, like when, on a rare day where we get fog, I'm absolutely, as I'm walking across campus in the morning, framing stuff, waiting for the silhouette to emerge, things like that. So absolutely, yes.
I was just going to ask you, you talked a little bit about cropping, editing, and mentally doing that. That's such an interesting creative exercise because I know that's not what I do naturally. And hearing that that's something that you're actively thinking about is both like art convicting me and also like just really intriguing. So, what is the process that you go through when you're taking photos in terms of like the photo itself is a seemingly a very immediate medium, right? It's the act of taking the photo, but you do a lot with cropping and editing to make sure that what you want to be communicated is communicated to the best that it can be. So can you walk us through your process for that mentally thinking about that?
As far as taking them goes, there's a bit of skill and absolute serendipity to what's taking place and what's happening. And depending on what it is that I'm going for or drawn to, it could be where I'm setting up and I have a scene framed because the light is just perfect or gorgeous, or there's this great angle coming in, a cast shadow of something or a funny sign in the background. And I just know, man, I need somebody to walk through this frame to make that sign really come alive, like have a great juxtaposition of human with this, funny saying or something, or I need a person to emerge out of this shadow, or I need this pop of color to happen. So with those, it's absolutely, I am sitting or standing and framing, in the camera. I'm using the viewfinder and I'm paying attention to, what's on the edges, where's this center of interest going to be. And so I'm trying to, and if I have time, I'll even try maybe what would this look like if I went portrait versus landscape, and just try to see what would best serve it, because my hope is that I can capture it the right way without having to crop too much later. But then as far as like with serendipity goes, there are times where, I don't have time to set up and frame and wait. And, we're on the move walking somewhere, or we're at a crosswalk and we're just there waiting for a few seconds. And, there's going to be this flood of people going by. And in those moments, it's the serendipity, and it's just, I have my camera, it's on and ready, and I'm pretty sure my focus is going to be good. And then I'm just snapping stuff that's interesting to me. There are things that I know are going to probably be throwaway pictures later, but I'm just capturing what I can, and maybe there will be something that's kind of like a diamond that comes out of that rough. And there are times where, especially when I was first kind of stepping into the street photography kind of genre, where I would maybe, if I had shot it in landscape, I would maybe flip it to portrait and kind of really zoom in on something, because I'm thinking from a graphic design standpoint, like I'm trying to simplify and look at big shapes and things like that, strong values, strong contrast. And I would get to the point where, I've cropped too much and the quality is starting to fall off, and I just feel like it's not in keeping with the spirit of what I was shooting. And so earlier on, I probably would have posted that. But as I've done this, several years now, I'm now just deciding, what, this isn't up to what I believe I could do or what the quality is that I've come to expect of myself. And so I just won't post it. Maybe it's something I'll keep on my phone and look at, to enjoy to myself, and wishing I had done better or been more skilled or better prepared, that kind of thing. My editing philosophy is I'm trying to get the image to look like what I remember in my mind. So as good as cameras are, of course, this, like they're never going to replace what we can see with our eye. And we can even be so much more selective with our eye. Like, the scene can be happening in front of me, and I'm like just through my eye looking at one particular person, and everything else is basically gone or blurred or whatever. And I take the picture and I'm like, whoa, what's all this extra junk in my frame? Like, where did this stuff come from? Of course, like the limits of the tool as well. Like the colors probably aren't as rich as what we saw with our eye. Probably, like, absolutely, they're not. Values, contrast. Is there color in the shadow? Are there colors in the whites or the lights of the person or the object? And so I'm just trying to, I don't have a photographic memory at all, but I do have that like painting background and then graphic design. And so I'm thinking, what did this look like when I took it? And I'm trying to get it to look like that in my mind, what my mind remembers, rather than what was recorded on the memory card, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's this is just like a landscape painting nerd rabbit trail, but like in Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting, he talks about in the final chapter how kind of like the final boss of landscape painting is painting from memory, because it takes everything that was not essential and it throws it away, and you only remember what you were actually drawn to. Because he describes exactly what you're talking about. You start painting, and everything that was not what was drawing you to it is all of a sudden grabbing you and pulling you and distracting you, so that's so cool that you do that same process for photography. Oh, that's so cool. All right. What are some of the most memorable interactions you've had while shooting? So, like highs and lows, best and worst.
Okay, so two readily come to mind. One, we were at a local restaurant, Bodacious Brew, and we were eating, and I noticed a man and his son. He looked like a Navy officer, like just in his uniform. He had his hat, looked like he had some decoration as well, and just looked like a very, very sharp person, like just fantastic. And I thought, when they came in, I thought, I gotta get a picture of him somehow. Then I realized he had a son with him who was in a Boy Scouts uniform. And it just struck me like, I totally see this. And I love that there are people like this out there. I feel like they're fewer and far between than maybe in past days or past eras, but it just felt like this very heritage moment, like this father taking his son out to breakfast and training him just in the way that his son should go. And then even better, so after they order and they get their food, they pray together over their meal. And so I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. I was able to convince my family, can we please just hang out until they leave so that I can get a picture of them? So we did that, and they finished up, they started to leave, and it was a really neat moment because it was starting to sprinkle outside as well. So it was a little bit overcast. So the colors were going to get nice and rich. And then there's some like atmospheric things happening. So I follow them out. Whenever I do this, I imagine what other people are thinking as they're watching me from a different perspective. But I'm like following these people through down the sidewalk underneath some awnings there downtown Pensacola, I think I got 3 or 4 pictures of them crossing the street. And then that was the moment. And the pictures are fine. They're not fantastic. They're not the best pictures I've ever taken by any stretch, but it was just, I wanted to somehow, if I could, just record the idea of that there's this man who I don't know, I've never met, but he looks like somebody that I would want to emulate in life, and who probably has made some really good decisions. And he's with his son, and it looks like, just from the fact that he's wearing this Boy Scouts uniform, that he's helping his son make good decisions as well. And I just wanted to try to capture that. So that's like part 1 of the story. So that was in, I want to say like 2017, somewhere back there. I think probably a year goes by, and I get a message on Instagram it was like a message request. So somebody that I don't know, I don't follow, doesn't follow me. And it was this guy reaching out. He had been back there, and a barista at the cafe that I'm friends with, she follows me, I follow her. She saw my photo. She recognized him when they came in again, like a year later, and tells him about these photos that are fantastic that this photographer took. I guess she showed them to him, and then gave him my contact information on Instagram. So he messaged me, said, I love these photos. I'm so happy that this moment got recorded. Is there any way like you still have them? So thankfully I had them on an SD card still. And I was able to email those to him. And I think, he was living in Japan. Like, they had moved, and just like halfway around the world. And years later, just this neat moment of coming full circle and being able to get photos to him and everything. It was just a great moment. So that was definitely a high moment for me in that endeavor.
Man, that is nuts.
It's really cool.
That is so cool. It's like, wow. It's like it sounds like a Norman Rockwell like moment, but so much more tangible, because it's like Pensacola Bodacious Brew. Like, it's actually happening,
Okay.
It's one of those like real tangible, when the ideal becomes tangible, and you're like, wow, that's so cool.
Now that you bring Rockwell into it, I wish the photos had some of that quality, because
no, it's not. When you said they prayed together, I pictured the grandma and the boy at the train station praying, with the 2 guys with the cigarettes watching them.
Gotcha.
But the moment is I'm saying, I wasn't trying to say it's derivative of Rockwell. It's just so that it brings up that ideal, which I find that so interesting with the idea of hardly invincible, where you saw someone who you kind of seemingly saw as invincible. You were like, wow, that guy's making all the right decisions. He's doing the right thing. He was
good thought.
He was a Superman to you in that moment, and he really caught your attention, which I think is really
That's
cool.
awesome. I didn't think of that. Good.
Greg, we get to ask listener questions sometimes, and this one fits perfectly with what you were just saying about people watching you. Do you hold the camera up here when you're doing all this, or do you shoot from the hip so people don't see what's going on? This is a question from Adam, one of our listeners one of our podcast participants. So he
Okay.
wants to know, are you a stealth guy, or do you just put the camera up to you put your eye up to the viewfinder and go ahead?
I will shoot it in any way that is best in that moment. I think typically I am shooting from the viewfinder. But I did get a new camera about a year ago, and it has a flip down screen to where I can hold it at my hip or my waist and just be looking downward. And I have availed myself of that feature a lot more now that I have that camera. So I'd say probably 70% of the time would be a good estimate for viewfinder, and then either back screen or flip down screen for that 30 other percent.
I would also say to Adam, if he just scrolled Greg's feed for 3 or 4 rows, he would see a reflection of Greg taking a photo and would have the answer to that question. We could have skipped all. No, I'm just kidding.
No.
It's a really neat photo. You should go check it out if you're listening.
Yeah. What's your worst interaction?
Oh, okay. Oh, man. All right. I got to be careful here, not to offend any listeners. This is wild. Like, I still think of this story today. It wasn't that long ago, maybe a year and a half or so. So I was back home. This would have been on a vacation, and I want to say it was a summer vacation. So I grew up in the Tampa area. So we were down in Tampa, and my dad is such a great sport. He loves photography as well. And so when I'm down there, I always hope that we can go out together and do some shooting for an afternoon. So we went to kind of a city within a city. So there's Tampa proper. Well, part of Tampa, there's this little city called Ybor City, and it's just fantastic. It's got a lot of rich history. There's a lot of Cuban presence there with cigar factories, and it almost feels a little bit like New Orleans in some ways. A lot of like old architecture, brick streets. And then they have this really interesting population of like free roaming chickens and roosters and things. And so it's one of my favorite places to go shoot just because of the history and just the colors and textures and things there. So we were down there shooting, and we had been down there for a few hours, and I think we were pretty much wrapping up, and it was starting though to be almost golden hour, which is one of my favorite times to shoot. So lots of great, long shadows, golden light happening. And so I was on one side of the street shooting. I think my dad was essentially done, and he was just hanging around, as long as I wanted to be there. And he was across the street. And so I'm shooting, and the way I was shooting, like I was pointing into the sun. So everybody that I'm shooting is backlit, and really I wasn't even making out individual features. It was basically just silhouettes, and they're kind of walking underneath this awning, and there's these really nice long shadows and stuff. So I'm shooting, and I'm finished, and I'm just about to cross the street, and all of a sudden I hear this voice, and it's like, "What are you doing?" And I look, and it's a girl that the nicest, like safest, most uplifting way would just be like, it was somebody who I'd say like we would have complete philosophical differences. I don't know how much more detail I can give there, but like just had the look of somebody that we would probably not see eye to eye on as far as what's important to us and what we're pursuing in life. So anyway, it was also like kind of a charged time in America where there's like a lot of restlessness and just things happening with protests and things like that. So anyway, this person says to me, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just taking pictures." And she said, "Did you just take a picture of me?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." I had never seen her before, and she definitely was not in the group of people where I was shooting. And she said, "So if you were to show me your screen, you wouldn't have a picture of me, right?" And she tapped my camera, which like instantly boils my blood, right? Like, please don't touch my things. I'm still very much a kid in that realm, right? So I said, "That's right. Like, I didn't take your picture." And she said, "Well, you're like really aggressive out here." And I'm guessing she means like I have something other than a cell phone that I'm taking pictures with. Like I didn't feel aggressive. Like I'm just standing on a corner shooting pictures. And she's like, I know about privacy laws and photography and stuff, and you should not be out here. You can't be doing this. And I'm scratching my head thinking like I'm in a public place and there's like, I don't think a right to privacy in a public place, but okay, like good for you. I'm thinking all this in my head. I'm not saying much. And she said, so I don't want you to be doing this anymore. And I just gave her like a thumbs up at that point because I'm like, there's nothing really that I can say to you. And, full disclosure, I probably didn't have the best spirit at that moment. I was definitely tapping into high school Greg, where I'm just like, all right. Well, that set her off. Like the thumbs up was the last straw for her. So she's like, you're not going to take pictures and I'm taking your hat. And like, she literally grabs my hat and walks away. And I'm like, this is really weird. Like, I don't understand what's happening. So I look across the street to my dad, and I can tell by the look on his face that he has just seen this whole encounter, like what's taken place. So I cross the street. He asks me what happens. I tell him we're just like in utter shock because like never have I up until this point had an experience like this. I'm kind of shaking because it's just like a really weird confrontation. And I'm like, well, I kind of want to go up to this area where the roosters and chickens usually are. Do you care if we do that? And then we can go like that's just, I don't know, like I kind of lost my taste for it, but I do want to go to that area first. And he's like, yeah, sure. So we walk up a block, maybe 15, 20 minutes, take some more pictures. And then we come back to the main street there in Ybor City and we start heading towards the car. It's like, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 blocks down. So we're walking and I glance over and I see the girl and she's wearing my hat. And I look at my dad and I'm like, I'm taking my hat back. And he's like, no, you're not. I'm like, I so am taking my hat back. So I take off my camera bag. I hand it to him. I'm like, let's meet up at this certain cafe. After I get my hat, like that's going to be our destination. Okay. He's like, please don't do this. I'm like, you can't just steal my hat. Come on. So I cross the street. I'm walking slow enough where I'm not like getting noticed. And I'm pacing myself so I can catch up to her. And I my heart is pounding. I'm like 5 feet behind her. I'm like, all right, I'm going to start into a run so that I'm already running. And then I'm going to grab it and keep running. So I start running. This is so immature, right? Like, why am I telling you this story? So I start running. I grab this hat and I said, I'm taking my hat back. And she swears, she says something and she starts chasing me. Okay. So I'm running down the street with my hat. I'm so happy, but like my heart's pounding. She's running after me and she's like trash talking me. She's like, you don't think you're faster than me, do you? You don't think this, do you? And I go around the block. I go behind some buildings. I'm sprinting and I'm starting to realize like she's not trash talking anymore. And then I realize I'm not hearing any footsteps anymore. And then that's when I realized like I totally outran this girl. And I like sweat, pouring down my body from the adrenaline, from the running and the heat. And I'm victorious though, right? So I end up walking to the cafe that I told my dad we would meet up at. And he's there and we start talking about like what happened. And he said, I was following you. And just for like full disclosure, my dad has a concealed carry. So he was carrying and he just wanted to make sure nothing happened. And so he said, I followed you until like you turned the corner. And then I knew I couldn't keep up and I didn't know where you were going. So he asked me what happened. I told him the whole story and everything. And it was just so random, right? And but I was successful, had my hat. So the story's not over. Okay. So
Oh, you're kidding. You're kidding.
no, so we're in this cafe now. And so like we got some like iced tea. We're just kind of hanging out, drinking it so I can cool down. This is probably like 20 minutes after the whole encounter. And the cafe we were at has this really great logo on the window. And so I wanted to shoot from inside the cafe, out the cafe with this logo and hopefully get somebody walking through the frame. And I take the pictures, we get in the car, we end up driving home. So I'm transferring the pictures later. And I'm looking through them, looking at the last picture I took there with the logo on of the cafe on the window. And I'm not even kidding you, the girl was walking through the photo. So I did have her picture, but it was later and it wasn't on purpose. But I gotta tell you this too, the story still is not done, okay? So that was like, I wanna say a Thursday or a Friday. And then the next Monday, my wife and I got up super early and we drove to downtown Tampa to go to our favorite breakfast spot there. And no one is out, okay? So it's like 6:30 in the morning. We park, no one around, like downtown is completely empty. You know, I'm like an early person, so we're there before the restaurants open. So we're walking around for a few minutes. We come around this corner. There's one person like in the whole universe in this moment, and it is that girl. Like completely across town, days later, and I'm like, Sarah, that's the girl. That's the girl who took my hat. And I don't know if I was wearing the hat again or not. I don't think I was. But we passed and she did not notice that it was me. I definitely noticed it was her. But I was just like, please don't let anything else happen. Like, I don't need any more situations with this person. So that was the last time I saw her. So the story is over, but that was the worst ever encounter in this street photography situation.
All right. Well, we're going to just wrap it up there. And
yeah, sorry, that was kind of long, right?
No, I'm just saying, I don't know how we can top it. I that's the question for the ages. So,
oh my goodness. I'm like so curious whether you have great taste in hats. Like, and she was just like, I need the hat. Like if she interacted with you as an excuse to get the hat, it's so interesting. Wow.
It was,
I love that story.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It wasn't a spectacular hat or anything.
yeah.
I guess it was like the least invasive form of assault, maybe. Like, I got to take something from this person. Let's take, you know, not the camera, not the camera bag, not the expensive stuff. Let's just take the hat.
Sure. Yeah. But I mean, if she ever hears this and hears this story, then, you know, there's no hard feelings because you have your hat back. So
yes,
it's we'll leave it at that. Right. I know our third question was, you know, what is the idea you want to communicate with your future photographs? And you've talked a little bit about that with Mr. Hardly Invincible. And I thought you actually summarized it quite well at the beginning. So can I throw you a curveball and ask you one final question? Because this idea of this photographer for you, very early on in our journey of interviewing folks, we stumbled upon the idea of personal work and how it influences the creative process for every artist, whether we realize it or not. And so it seems like, from what I'm gathering from our conversation, that this photography for you is a big part of your personal work. And so I was just curious to know if you can put your finger on anything that you've learned through photography that's influenced classes that you teach, or feedback that you give to students, or feedback that you give to yourself in other areas of creativity, or anything like that.
Boy, that is a curveball. I know I have definitely, as people have asked me about it, like, how do you do this? Or, you know, how do you get this resulting image? Things like that. I know one of my answers has always been, there's a fair amount of skill and planning with that level of serendipity, like the accidental or the unexpected. And that's just hoping that my settings are right and my focus is on. And when I look at like professional photojournalists who are capturing like these iconic moments, like presidential photographers and things like that. I am always in awe of how they can just be so completely just almost perfected in their skill to where they can anticipate and they can capture those moments that happen in just a split second, and they can just get something that is just, like history making iconography in that medium. So that's one thing is I am sharing that lesson with people. I don't know if this is going to quite be an answer that's in line with the question. So if it's not, let me know and I can cycle back. Like Mark earlier mentioned, like I have a painting background and graphic design and writing and things. I don't know if you're this way, but I really love creativity when it's unexpected, as in I love making things for the delight of others, but when it becomes expected, that's when I don't enjoy it anymore. So like if I make a comic in high school, I was making a comic strip. Well, when I was making it and no one knew what the story was going to be, when I made something about somebody that was going to make them laugh or bring them delight, man, that was just such a magical moment. But when they started asking me, hey, when's the next issue or installment going to happen? Or, hey, can you draw me doing this? I suddenly did not enjoy it anymore. And I think I've just continued to try different things because like maybe portrait painting became too much of an expectation, or maybe graphic design, I was doing that for a living for several years. And it was like, you're expected to do these certain things from this time in the morning to this time in the afternoon. And like, I did have some enjoyment times in there, some pockets where I felt like I was fully and freely creating for myself. But there was absolutely a level of expectation put upon me. Just that's normal, right? I mean, you're in a situation where you're making something for somebody else for a living. They should have expectations on you. But for me, like creatively, I needed to do something more where there was no one saying, this is what we want, or this is what it should be. And so photography kind of became that for me, where I, for one, didn't know what I was going to be getting when I went out. I didn't know what people would be where or what lighting scenario I would encounter. And so I didn't have expectations. And then certainly if I don't, like, my audience isn't going to. So it's just this really free kind of experience where I can go and just enjoy even being out. Like there's no drawback from going and shooting pictures, even if they're garbage, like you just delete them off your card, but you still got to walk outside. You still got to enjoy architecture. You still got to see cool people. So what if I don't get anything? Like I don't have that expectation, and that's been just really freeing and rewarding for me. So I don't know if that quite answers the question, but that's just something that I've learned along the way that I definitely want to hold on to.
That's a perfect answer.
All right.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this interview. Would you mind just telling people one more time where they can find your work online so they can go and follow you?
So Instagram, it's at Hardly Invincible, and that's where you'll find like visual puns, just in the moment, unstaged life as it happens in front of me. And occasionally I'll post some more personal stuff, like something that I've really been enjoying too is family documentary photography, where it's almost like a photojournalistic approach to just everyday life and just, out and about with the family. So I'll post some of that stuff there too. And then my personal account is This Hewitt Life. And that's just, if you want to see like the people who just hold really deep and special meaning to me and like what our life looks like, that could be found there. Other than that, I'm trying to keep a pretty low profile on the internet, and but that's where you could reach me and see some of that work and buy prints if anything looks like something you would want to hang on your wall. I think David needs some photography on his wall there in his studio.
I need something.
Mark, you have a pretty blank wall there too. So
I don't know this wall though. So
okay.
Yeah, Mark's the one that needs the upgrade. So but I'll definitely look into it. So
Once again, thank you so much to Greg for being on the podcast with us this week. So be sure to follow Greg on Instagram at Hardly Invincible if you want to see his street style photography, or if you're interested in more of his family content, and like he said, the people who are close to him, you can look at This Hewitt Life, and that Hewitt is spelled Hewitt.
And then once you've done all that, you can subscribe to Destination Arate, the Creative Community Podcast, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. We're on Amazon Podcasts. We're on SoundCloud. All of those are free platforms for you to listen to us on. For more episodes like this one, we interview people of all creative ventures and all creative backgrounds. And if you find one of those interviews helpful, be sure to leave us a comment or review. I love reading YouTube comments, Mark. We've started to get more and more of those, so we need to start incorporating that into the outro here, where we read one of our favorite comments. People were really enjoying the past March, where we had the bracket recap episodes. Lots of people had opinions and were commenting on YouTube about that. So that tells the algorithm that you enjoyed our content, and they'll send it to you again. They'll send you more of our content if you do that.
Yeah, and you can connect with us on Facebook and Instagram, Destination Arete, ARETE, for information about future episodes like this one, as well as information about community activities and upcoming Arete projects.
And if you want to be the first to know about those, you can keep your hat on, but you can also hear about upcoming interviews. Like our newsletter subscribers got a list of the people that we're interviewing, the 4 interviews we have coming up next. So if you want to be one of those people, destinationarete.com/contact is a great way to sign up, or just send us an email, destinationarete@gmail.com, to subscribe to the newsletter. That goes out probably every other week, letting you know about episodes, letting you know about upcoming things. If you're on the newsletter subscriber list, you found out about the event we had in Pensacola last month first, before anyone else did. So yeah, that's a fun group of people to be part of. You get to hear about all this stuff first before it comes out. So after you've done all that, we'll be back in 2 weeks with another interview. We'll see you then.